Bad Ones, Chapter 4. The next morning, Corey and I found the Jenningses waiting for us in the dining room. "We saw it," Mr. Jennings whispered. "We actually saw it and heard it." "It pointed at us and screamed." Mrs. Jennings pressed a hand against her heart. "It was terrifying." Corey feigned disappointment. "Oh no, I must have slept right through it." She glanced at me. "Did you see it?" I shook my head, trying to look as bummed as Corey. "I guess I was really tired." By then, the bike riders had joined us. "Are you talking about that noise last night?" Tim asked. "What was it?" Robert wanted to know. "A cougar or something?" Mrs. Jennings stared at him. "You didn't see it?" Robert shook his head. "It woke us up, but by the time we got to the window, it was gone." "If it was a cougar, we should stay off the trails," Tim said. "A few years ago, one of those big cats killed a bike rider in California." At that moment, Mr. Brewster walked past on his way to the kitchen. "That was no cougar," he muttered. "Are you sure?" Robert asked. "Of course I'm sure." Mr. Brewster stopped and scowled as if Robert had called him a liar. "I've lived in Vermont all my life, so I ought to know what a cougar sounds like." It was the most I'd ever heard him say. "If it wasn't a cougar, what was it?" Tim asked, his eyes widening like a kid's at a horror movie. Mr. Brewster had already lost interest in the subject. With a shake of his head, he disappeared into the kitchen, leaving us to stare after him. "A ghost," Mrs. Jennings said. "It was a ghost." Robert laughed. "That's ridiculous." Mrs. Jennings frowned at Robert. "My husband and I saw it ourselves, as plain as can be, by that grove of trees." Mrs. Jennings waved her hand towards the window in the oaks. "It pointed at the inn and screamed in the most hideous, inhuman way." Robert laughed again, but Tim just stood there as if he wasn't sure what to think. Mr. Jennings laid a hand on my sister's shoulder. "This young lady saw it the night before last." Corey shuddered. "It was awful." Before Robert could say anything sarcastic, Tim grabbed his arm. "Lay off, will you? You didn't see it. They did." Across the room, Mr. Nelson looked up from his newspaper. "So the ghosts are back," he said. "I was hoping they'd gone for good." Just then, Grandmother came into the dining room. Tracy was right behind her, carrying a tray heaped with breakfast goodies. "What's back?" Grandmother asked. "The ghosts," Mr. Nelson grimaced. "Didn't you hear the screams last night?" Tracy gasped and almost dropped the tray. I thought it was a screech owl." "I heard what sounded like a scream," Grandmother said. "I must admit it scared me, but after we went back to bed, I realized what it was." Corey and I darted a quick glance at each other. Had Grandmother guessed we'd played a prank on the Jenningses? I held my breath and waited for her to denounce us. "Some people a mile or so down the road breed peacocks," she went on. "One must have flown the coop, so to speak." She smiled at her own joke. "A peacock's cry sounds remarkably like a human scream." "There," Robert said to Tim. "I knew there was a rational explanation." "But what about the ghosts?" Tim asked. "All three of them have seen it." Grandmother looked at us, plainly annoyed. "You were talking about ghosts the other night, swapping stories, trying to scare each other," she said. "You expected to see a ghost, and you've convinced yourself you did." Mrs. Jennings frowned at Grandmother. "I didn't imagine that ghost. If you'd been at your window, you would have seen it too." "You were looking out the window at 3 a.m.? Robert asked in disbelief. "Corey saw the ghost the night before at exactly 3 a.m., Mrs. Jennings said. She told George and me to watch for it in the grove of trees." I held my breath, hoping the phone or the doorbell would ring. Anything to distract Grandmother from questioning my sister and me. Unfortunately, no one called and no one came to the door. Grandmother fixed Corey with a steely gaze. "You never mentioned seeing a ghost." Unable to meet Grandmother's eyes, Corey stared at the floor. You wouldn't have believed me," she whispered. "But I saw it, and I was scared, and I told Mrs. Jennings because I knew she'd believe me." While we were talking, Mr. Nelson had gone back to reading his newspaper. I sidled over to him. "Why did you say the ghosts were back? Have you seen them before?" He put down the paper with some irritation. "I've been coming to Fox Hill every July for 20 years. he said. I remember the purported ghost as well as the reporters and the psychics and the nuts who came to witness the going-ons. They swarmed upstairs and down, ranting about cold spots, setting up bizarre recording devices and infrared cameras, making nuisances of themselves. Fools, that's what they were. Idiots. He took a sip of coffee. The inn is much better off without ghosts, he said. And the maniacs who flocked here to see them, they caused the most disturbance by far. Across the room, Robert seated himself noisily. Get a move on, Tim, he said in a loud, you-can't-fool-me voice. We're doing a century rite today. Before he joined his friend, Tim smiled at Corey. My girlfriend is psychic, too, he told her. She sees all kinds of things, just like you do, including those blue lights I was telling you about the other night. Grandmother watched Tim join Robert at their table. Turning to Corey, she said, I don't know what you're up to, but I simply do not believe one word of this ghost nonsense. To the rest of us, she said, Breakfast is ready. Please take your seats and Tracy will serve you. Corey and I sat down and Grandmother sat between us. No more ghost talk, she said. I won't have you scaring the guests with silly stories. Corey kicked me under the table and I kicked her back. She giggled. I'm serious, Grandmother said. We both nodded and turned our attention to the plates Tracy set down in front of us. Scrambled eggs with cheese, home-fried potatoes, and a big cranberry muffin. That afternoon, 3 couples, all friends of the Jenningses, arrived and requested rooms. Mrs. Jennings had told them about the ghost sighting, and they were full of questions. Grandmother became increasingly annoyed, but no matter what she said, the new guests refused to be discouraged. If the Jenningses had seen a ghost, the ghost was real, and they wanted to see it themselves. Aren't you glad you have more guests? Corey asked at dinner time. Not if they're coming to see ghosts, Grandmother said. They're bound to be disappointed. Sipping her iced tea, her expression as sour as a lemon, she regarded the 4 couples huddled around a table by the window. Mrs. Jennings was describing the screaming phantom to her friends. It pointed right at me and cursed me. Not George, me. It cursed me. Oh, my goodness, Mrs. Bennet, one of the new guests, gasped. You must have been terrified. As Mrs. Jennings shivered, Mr. Jennings said, You should have seen its eyes. They were red and they glowed like hellfire. Oh, for heaven's sakes, Grandmother muttered more to herself than Corey and me. This is getting more ridiculous by the moment. Without waiting for Tracy to bring coffee, she left the dining room. The others followed her outside, chatting noisily. Corey went to the library to read, and I followed Tracy into the kitchen. Do you think Mrs. Jennings really saw a ghost? I asked. She looked up from a sink full of soapy dishes. Maybe, she said slowly, but I can't be sure unless I see it myself. Wouldn't you be scared? I was hoping she'd say yes and faint in my arms or something, but she merely shrugged. Without even looking at me, she said, Ghosts can't hurt you. Mrs. Brewster laid a heavy hand on my shoulder. Unless you want to help Tracy clean up, she said, I suggest you find someone else to talk to. Taking the hint, I left Tracy to her dishes and went outside. Grandmother was sitting in a lawn chair, enjoying the last of the sunset. Robert and Tim were playing a relaxed game of tennis, and Mr. Nelson had settled himself in a rocking chair, his face hidden behind the evening paper. The Jennings party was seated in a circle, taking turns reading from the Haunted Inn's book. No one noticed me stroll across the lawn to the Haunted Grove, as Mr. and Mrs. Jennings now called it. The sun had just sunk behind the mountains, and the air was growing cool and damp. A breeze rustled the leaves, and a bird called. As I stood in the shadows looking at the inn, I had a sudden feeling I wasn't alone. Expecting to see my sister, I glanced behind me. No one was there. But the feeling lingered. Corey? I peered into the shadows, gathering under the trees. For a second, I thought I saw something duck out of sight behind one of the tall oaks. Hey, I called. I see you. My voice sounded loud in the quiet evening and a little high-pitched, almost as though I was scared, which of course I wasn't. No one answered. Leaves rustled and something on the ground snapped, maybe a branch cracking underfoot, maybe an animal scurrying past unseen. With a shiver, I left the grove and hurried back to the inn. I told myself I'd heard a squirrel or something, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me.